Hey, we are live, I think. Awesome. Let me get some things set up here. Let's get going. Okay. Can't believe it's been another week. Right on. And this is the sixth episode so far. So I'm mildly impressed with myself. I've been doing this for 6 weeks. And it's been fun. Having a lot of fun talking about Go, talking about AWS, serverless stuff, building things in my basement. I'm still down here in the basement. And yeah, every week I finish these up and I think, what am I going to talk about next week? And then lo and behold, there's all sorts of stuff to cover. So yeah, I hope we have a good time today. Um, I'm going to do like a brief recap as usual. We're still working on this poem generator idea. So hopefully we get it into a good place where like the next phase is to actually do something with it, more interesting than just an API. But yeah, we're going to keep working on it a little bit more this week. As we do that, I'm going to talk a bit today about how to publish packages for Go. So if you're writing Go packages and you want them to be available to the world, I'm going to kind of walk through how to do that. The spoiler alert is it's super simple. You almost don't have to do anything, but there's a few things to know about. So I'll kind of cover that stuff. And then also last week was some pretty exciting news in the generative AI space, which this project is making use of. So Anthropic's Claude version 3 was released, uh, which is awesome. I'll kind of touch on that a bit. It's already available in Amazon Bedrock. So we can actually try it out and see if we get different kinds of results or if it's more efficient or faster or what. I don't know. We're going to tinker around with it and see what Claude 3 can do for us. But that's really exciting news. It's supposed to be right up there with GPT-4 and all the other big name LLMs now. So things are starting to heat up in the generative AI space, as it were. So I'm very excited about that. Uh, and yeah, I want to talk a bit about what's next for this project and start thinking about how we can build an application around it, something that is I don't know, maybe it could be like an SMS kind of thing, or maybe it could be an email kind of thing, or just a website, or all of those. I don't really know yet. So we're gonna check some of that stuff out. I also want to talk a little bit about Lambda authorizers, uh, which I'll be honest, I don't know a ton about myself. So we're gonna have to try things out and see if we can make it work. But Lambda authorizers with API gateway are super powerful and easy to do, apparently. So we will give it a try. But why don't I start with my screen sharing? Hold on one second. Share. What do I want to share? Let's start by sharing uh, this guy here. Yeah. All right. And let's put me over here. Okay, cool. So I'm going to start by doing a little bit of a recap, just like we did last time. And for those of you who are new, last few weeks we've been working on this project, and it's basically an API. So we're building an API. We're using API Gateway, and we're using Lambda. And what the API does is it generates poetry um, using generative AI. So using Anthropic Claude, which is inspired by artworks in the Cleveland Museum of Art. So let's go check that out for a moment. Uh, let's just go to the main website first. So Cleveland Museum of Art is this awesome museum up in Cleveland, and they have a open access um, collection, which means you can search their collection. They have over 60,000 artworks in that collection. You can look at images. You can find out details about each artwork in the collection. But what it means that it's open access is that you can actually grab metadata about these objects, and in many cases, you can get the images for these objects as well. and you can do whatever you want with them, all sorts of stuff. So here, for example, this one has a little identifier at the bottom of it, which says that it's in the public domain. So pretty cool art object. You can go to this record, you can read all about it, but you can actually download the high resolution images. Uh, and that's pretty cool. So in addition to this awesome website where you can search the collection, there is an API. So if we go to openaccess-api.clevelandart.org, you get all the documentation about it. So it gives you a little bit of a synopsis about what's in this API. And this is what we've been doing for the last few weeks. We've been kind of tinkering with some of these API endpoints. So specifically where is it? Down here. The get artwork, that's not it, hold on. Get artwork specific API endpoint. And so all you do is you pass in an identifier uh, to this endpoint for the artwork that you're looking for, and it will give you back a whole bunch of JSON data, metadata about that artwork. That's probably hard to see here. Let me make it a little bigger. So you get things like its copyright status. So this one is a public domain CC0 item. You get back a thing called a tombstone, which is sort of like a description of the object with things like its dimensions all in one giant string. Then a whole bunch of other things like its title, its creation date, circa 1550 to 1650, where it's from, what kind of artwork it is. This one's an oil on canvas, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Down at the bottom, there's like pretty lengthy descriptions about the artworks. And not all of them have this, but a lot of them do. And so what we're doing with our project is we're grabbing an artwork from that open access collection, and we're using all that metadata that I just showed you to ask Anthropic's Claude Instant to generate us a short poem inspired by that document. And so the last few weeks, we've been basically wiring up a Lambda function to do all those things. And then in order to make it more efficient, faster, and cost effective, we added in a DynamoDB table to store the poems as they're generated. So you make a request. If the poem is not in the database already, we are going to generate it on the fly. And it's taking about 7 seconds or so, maybe 10 seconds tops for Claude Instant to come up with a poem and for us to grab the artwork. And then we're saving it in DynamoDB and then sending the poem back as a response in API gateway. We haven't really dealt with this CloudFront part over here. I put this on a while back ago as a sort of future thing to do, but we'll get to that eventually. But for the moment, we're just sending back the response directly through API gateway, and that way, the next time somebody requests the same poem, it'll find it in DynamoDB, and rather than doing all this stuff, it'll just send it right back straight away. So it's sort of like a cache in a way. So that's all working. Yeah. So last time we were poking around with this, it was working. Let's see if it's still. I can check it out and make sure it's still up and running. Yeah. So let's go over to AWS to try that out. So over in my API gateway, we can go and find the API itself and get the endpoint. There's other ways to do this, which we know now, but here it is, generate poems API. Now, it's always nice to go into the console and sort of take a walk around rather than doing everything from the command line. So here's our API. So far, we just have a GET request defined. And if you look at this, is kind of nice. You get sort of a visualization of what's happening. So you have a client, makes a request to that endpoint. It creates an integration request to Lambda. Lambda does all of its thing, whatever you program it to do, and it sends back a proxy integration response back to the client. So it's just a round trip, super simple. And you'll notice there's no authorization at this point, so anybody can call this API, uh, and nothing else really defined at all. All right, so if we want to get the endpoint, we go down to stages. And so what's nice about API Gateway, by the way, while we're here, is that you can define multiple stages. And so you can actually test and stage your API while you have a production one in place. And before you move your changes to production, you can do that kind of stuff. We're not doing that, but that's all right. That's available in API Gateway. So that's very, very handy to know about. Cool. So down here, you'll see your invoke URL. So I'm just going to copy that. We'll make a new browser tab, and uh, it's already got one in here. So if I hit that, we're going to get a response super quick. So we had a little cold start there with Lambda, I think. And then it got our poem from the database and returned it here. So there's a few things I just wanted to call out. I installed a Chrome extension so that we can see JSON files in the browser very nice. So that's a good thing to do. But down here, here's the body of our response. We're sending back to our client a poem. The poems always have this thing in the beginning that says, here is a short poem inspired by the artwork. This is kind of like Claude telling us what we're about to get. So there's a few strategies I can think of to remove that because that's not really the poem. So I think we're going to try to figure out how to do that today, maybe. We'll see. And then we also get this error blob back here as part of our response. That's not really ideal because we don't have an error. So we're going to do a few things today to remove that as well. And vice versa, when we do have an error, we don't want to get like an empty poem back. Yeah, and so we might want to add a stat parameter here or something like that. So you can design your API any way you want, right? And you can make it REST, or you can make it REST-ish, or you can make it your own thing. It's up to you. So there's no real rules around this. There are recommendations and specs and best practices, but we're just building our own project, so we're going to do what we want. So I have a few ideas about what we can do here in terms of making this a little cleaner. But point here is we put in an ID up here at the top in our URL. We grabbed this poem right out of DynamoDB and sent it back to the client super fast. Let's grab a different one that we haven't done yet. I think I have. Yes. Okay. So I haven't done this one yet. This is what is this? An acrylic on paper poem, or artwork rather. And yeah, it's got a pretty decent description. So about the artist. Okay, so let's grab this ID number and give it a try. So let's go back to our API and put in that ID number. See if it's all still working. So, oh wait, did I do the exact same one? Just a sec. 385. I must have already done that one because it came back, yeah, really fast. All right, let's find one I haven't done yet. Let's scroll down. I think there's some more in here. Okay, here's one. I know I haven't done this one. Ooh, Margaret Burke White, a famous photographer. Okay, so we'll put in that new ID, 449531. I don't think I've done that one yet. And so now you're going to see it's going to take a little bit of time. Oh, not too much time. It took about 3 or 4 seconds there. And we get this poem back. So it is all still working. Cool. And if I do it again, super fast. All right. So our project is working. We've got a few things I'd like to kind of deal with. And I also want to kind of restructure the code a bit and talk about packages, because one of the big benefits of the way I think Go is designed is it makes it really easy to share and reuse your code in different places. Share it publicly if you want, or just within your own organization. It's a pretty nice and simple system for doing that kind of stuff. So I want to get into that today. And yeah, let's start by jumping over to our code editor. All right. And then we're going to get into Claude 3, check out what Claude 3 can do. Okay, let's see. Let's present our code editor. Here we go. I think that's the right one. Yeah, all right, I have a few open. Okay, cool. Here we are, code editor. And then looks like maybe we can make that a little bit bigger. That's not bad. All right, cool. Let's just like quickly review what we've got here. So we've got this project. Um, there's a template.yml file, YAML file, and this is what defines our serverless application. So this has all of our stuff in it. It's got our function, our serverless function, Lambda function here. It's got that points to where the code is, there's a bunch of metadata about how we want to run it, like the memory size, a timeout, architecture, that kind of stuff. Then it's got a reference to our API. So we're creating a GET request for this. This function is going to basically respond to a GET request on the root. We've got some environment variables about the DynamoDB table that we're talking to, and a policy that allows the Lambda function to communicate with DynamoDB for that specific table. We've got our log group. So every time we we run that function, we're going to get a log for it. Then we have the whole API defined right here. So this is API gateway. And then here's the DynamoDB table defined. So we just have this one property defined here, which is the ID. And we're saving the ID as a string at the moment. And that's cool, no problem there. And then we added just a single output. So we have an output for the API endpoint. So when we deploy this from the command line, it'll spit out our API endpoint for us, mostly for convenience reasons. And then if we right click on here and do open with application composer, this is super cool. We can see like a visualization of our project. So you can see there's the API gateway, here's the Lambda function, here's the DynamoDB table. It's all sort of wired together. And then you can use this to go and like change some of that metadata. So this is a more visual way to create that template.yaml file. It's pretty nice. And then the rest of our project is basically the Lambda function. So here's the Lambda function. And there's also a package here called Cleveland Art. So if you remember back a couple weeks ago when we were working on this, we decided to extract some of our code, just specifically the code that calls the Cleveland Museum of Art's API into its own package. So we have a package up at the top here defined called Cleveland Art. And this makes it nice so that within this project, I can reuse this code, reuse this package. So I can add more capabilities to this. I can make it more sophisticated, and I can use it for multiple functions. So if I start generating more and more Lambda functions, I can have access to this function as a library. And so this is really nice. So this means that, yeah, it's reusable basically. And so when we think about packages in Go, I like to think of them as sort of, there's like 3 tiers or 3 scopes or something like that. So there are core packages, right? So you've got like these up at the top, Fumpt, IO, Net, HTTP. These are built right into Go. So you don't have to install them. You don't have to download them. They're part of the core Go. They're called core Go packages, I guess. Best way to put it. So that's like the smallest scope, right? Those are there for anyone to use. And then the next level up is what I think of as sort of like local packages. So within your project, right? So this project or module. I have a package called Cleveland Art, and all you have to do to make another package is create a folder for the package and create a file inside that folder, and at the top call it package, whatever you want to call it, Cleveland Art in this case. And so this package is referenceable by any other file in your module right here. Now, the interesting thing about Go is that it doesn't have to end there. So we can actually publish this entire repository on GitHub, and then other uh, projects, other modules can reference this package within this project. Okay, so what does that mean? So like let me go back to the Lambda function here. So here you can see I'm importing a bunch of core packages at the top. So context, foomt, and then you see there's this one here called go-generate-poems slash Cleveland art, right? So I'm essentially referencing a package within my own project right here locally. But then down here at the bottom, you can see I'm also referencing packages that have been published on GitHub. And they're referenced just by their URL, basically. So github.com/AWS/AWS Lambda Go/events, so on and so forth. And that's how you basically publish your packages. You just put them up on a repository like GitHub, and other companies will work too. So like GitLab or Bitbucket or any repository service that's out there. As long as you can make reference to it in this form, like this URL, it'll work. You can pull that into your Go project. And so what we could do here, if we wanted to, is rather than keeping this package as part of this generate poems function, we might want to make it its own thing, right? So here's the funny thing. You can actually publish this package as part of this generate poems function or generate poems project, and anyone can still use it if you make it public, because they can just reference it like this. Let me show you how it would look. It would be like github.com slash go-micah is my organization on GitHub slash, and then the name of this project is go generate poems, and the package is Cleveland art. Okay, so you could put that whole thing in there like that, and all the other project that you're building or someone else is building, they would only be really downloading and using this Cleveland art part, the package Cleveland art within your project. And that's fine. That'll totally work. We can do that. But uh, there's another way. Instead of doing that, you could make the package standalone. And so rather than it being a part of this generate poems project, it could be its own project, right? So Code Whisperer is helping me out. You could take out the go generate poems part and just publish that, right? You could publish this package as a repository on GitHub all by itself. And that's a little cleaner because now you've got a repository that's just about communicating with Cleveland art and has nothing to do with this specific project that you're building. But it will work either way. Either way works just fine. So that's kind of cool. All right, so just so you know, I've done this already. I've actually published another package on GitHub called Cleveland Art. So we can use that sort of replace the one that we built here. I built it a while back, so it might not be exactly the same as what we built here, but we can try it. And same thing goes with some stuff that we're going to do here regarding Bedrock. So first of all, let's take a look at the Cleveland Art project. Let me switch screens here. All right, hold on. Just a sec. Let's go back to our browser. Okay, here we are in our browser. So in my GitHub organization, so I have a GitHub organization called go-micah. And this is where I keep a lot of the code that I work on that you all have access to. So it's all publicly available in this organization. So these are all projects that are written in Go, mostly having to do with serverless and AWS and that kind of stuff. But this package in here, so go-micah/Cleveland art, I wrote a while back. It hasn't been documented yet, so there's no help or documentation. We'll talk about that in a moment. But you can see it's basically um, the same thing with some extra stuff. So the same thing we wrote in our a few weeks ago is in here. So somewhere in here there is a get artwork by ID function where you pass it an ID. Uh, it also allows you to pass in a bunch of other what I'm calling artwork parameters, and it returns a pointer to an artwork or and an error. So a similar approach that we did in our project. It does a few other things too. So in addition to doing the get artwork by ID, I also did a search artworks function. So you can pass in like a query. So if you want to search for all the chairs, you can do that, something like that. And that returns a pointer to an artworks object, and an artworks is an array of artworks. Yeah. uh, and then there's also a get random artwork function. So this is something we talked about last week, sort of toward the end of the session, the idea of adding some more capability to our project, where we might want to allow someone to get a random artwork rather than having to pass in an ID every time. And so this has all the code to do that built right in. I also created different types in here. So there is a type for, it's just called data, but it is a whole bunch of the parameters you get back from an API call to Cleveland Museum of Art. So it's a struct. And there's a struct for a single artwork and a struct for an array of artworks with all the metadata that you get back in that type of an API call. So it's just something kind of handy. But here, the reason I'm showing you this is because when you publish a package like this on GitHub and you make it public, you can go over to the Go website and you can click on packages. And this website allows you to essentially share your packages. So it's a little bit different if you're coming from the world of Python or Node, because in Python and Node, what you have to do is basically package up your package or your library and upload it to NPM or PyPy in order to sort of share it with the world. But the way Go works is it just basically indexes your um, GitHub page. So you can see here's a bunch of packages I have. Here's the Cleveland Art one. And you'll see it automatically creates documentation based on your source code. And you can see there's a bunch of stuff where it's like this section is empty. And that's because I haven't added any documentation there. But if I look at a different one, so here's one I made that does some imaging stuff. This one will pull in your README file with images and everything. And then it will, you'll see actual documentation. So right in the source code in Go, you can add documentation about every single thing that there is. So all your types, all your functions, the top level bit about the package. This is all right in the source code. So it's really nice. It's very easy to document your work. I can show you that one here in a second. So here's the imaging repository. So this is a package I created that does some image processing things. And there's a README file. So you can put in your standard, like, what is this thing? How does it work? But then you can, if I go into the source code, you'll see there's basically just comments. So a comment at the top of the file tells this website what to put here. So a little image processing library written in Go. And so that's right here. Or actually, no, that's wrong. That must be from the README. Where am I seeing that? Yeah, package imaging exports a few tools for image processing. So there it is, overview. And then each part of the package, so there's two functions in this package. If you look at the source code, here's a function called steps, which returns a grayscale image divided into 10 equal steps. And so you can just basically put in a comment, and then on the package website, there it is. Super simple. Something to know about is that it'll track versions based on your tags. So if you are creating versions for each release of your packages, and you put them with this format, which is, it's very hard to see probably, but basically the letter V, then a major and a minor and a, I don't know what the last one would be, but you get the idea. So in this case, version 0.0.3, and it'll keep track of all the different versions that you create. And to do that, all you have to do is go back to your repository uh, and click on tags. And you can use this releases button here and draft a new release. And if you give it the same format, it'll work just fine. And you can add, like, what happened during this release and that kind of stuff. And then the package website for Go will recognize this and create kind of a version. And that's really important because when you get back into your code, I'll show you here. So when you get back into, not that, when you're actually using the package in your module file, you can reference the version that you want to use. So you can keep track of which specific version you're using for a package. Okay, I've said a lot of stuff. I think what we should do is write some code and do some things. So let's switch back to my code editor. All right, let's see. Okay, so here we are. And I mentioned before, there's a couple things I want to do. So before we start turning things into packages, which I think is probably what we're going to do here in a little bit, what I'd like to do is fix up our response a little bit. So there's two things here. So one of them is that um, the poems that we're getting back come with uh, a little blurb in the beginning. So they say things like, here is a short poem, blah, blah, blah. So I want to figure out how to get rid of that. And I think there's basically two ways I can think of to not get that response back. One of them is to basically tell our large language model not to include it. And that may or may not work. So we can actually add into the prompt something like just the poem, nothing else, as part of the prompt. So we can try that. And then the other way will be to ask it to put the poem into some kind of tag, like an identifier, and then we can parse for that tag. So we could say something like, write a short poem inspired by the artwork and enclose it in poem tags or something like that. And then we can, before we save it into DynamoDB, we can try to parse for those tags. That sounds like the harder way to do it. I think that the first thing to try is just to see if we can get it to, um, you know, uh, write it without the blurb at the top to make it look like we want it to look. Yeah, so let's try that. Why don't we try that in Bedrock just to see if we can make it work. So let me try that. So I'm gonna switch back to our AWS console. And let's just see if our idea is even a good one. All right, so let's go to Bedrock. Okay, so let's use text. Let's select Anthropic Instant, which is what we're using at the moment. That got small. Okay, so let's say, first of all, let's try it like this. Write a short poem about chickens. Let's just try that out. Okay, so as you can see at the top, it said, "Here is a short poem about chickens," and then you get the poem. So let's modify that a bit. Let's say, "Write a short poem about chickens, just the poem, nothing else." Let's try that. We still get the chicken. Oh, that's interesting. We still get, "Here is a short poem about chickens. Just give me the poem." Still. Okay, so you could also try something like, um, let's see, return the poem inside poem tags. Let's see if we get any different result that way. Interesting. All right, this time it worked. It put it in these poem tags. That's nice. Uh, and it didn't return the little header blurb, which is kind of funny. So that's interesting. Let's try some different variants. Write a short poem inspired by artwork of Monet about chickens. Just return the poem and nothing else. Something like that. Let's see if that does anything. Eh, here's a short poem inspired by Monet. Okay, so it's still doing that. Let's try with that poem tag thing again. Return the result inside poem tags. Okay, let's try that. All right. That time we just got the poem. All right, well, interesting. So that might be what we'll have to do. We'll have to give it something like this and ask it to put the poem inside poem tags. And then we'll have to write a function that looks for these poem tags and parses just that bit there. So we could try that. Another thing I want to try while we're here is Claude 3. So as I mentioned before, Anthropic released Claude 3 last week. And actually it was this week, and this includes, on Amazon Bedrock, you can use Claude 3 Sonnet version 1. Eventually there's going to be 2 more variants of Claude 3 that have different characteristics, different capabilities. But right now there's Claude 3 Sonnet version 1, and it's nice that it's called Sonnet because we're generating poems. But anyway, it can take a context window up to 200,000 tokens, and apparently strikes the ideal balance between intelligence and speed. Very nice. So let's take a look at this. I wonder how it would differ. Let's try the return the poem and nothing else. I wonder if it'll understand me. Yeah. All right, Claude 3. Interesting. So maybe Claude 3 is just enough more intelligent Oh, monotone. Okay, so let's try a few more variants. All right, let's do write a short poem about chickens. Make it less than 300 words long and use a uh, limerick style. Return the poem and nothing else. So we're getting a little fancy here. I don't even know if I've spelled limerick correctly, but that's all right. All right, and look at that, it's starting to work. So a chicken so plump and so round, pecking away on the ground. Oh, wow. Okay, that's a nice poem. These are a little bit better. Interesting. And it didn't put the poem tag around it because I didn't ask it to, and it didn't add the um, here is a poem bit at the top. So maybe if I take this out, let's just try, see if it, so if I take it out, it gives me that here is a short poem about chickens bit at the top. It's still going. All right. All right. Okay. Well, that's cool. Claude 3 seems good. So interesting thing about Claude 3 that I've learned this past week is that it uses a new API from Anthropic. So there is the sort of legacy API, and now there's this new thing called the Messages API. And so if we want to use Claude 3, what we're going to have to do is rewrite our function that sends our API requests to Amazon Bedrock so that they are also using this Messages API. And that's not hard. And the Bedrock, I have this Bedrock package that I've made that we should be able to use instead. So let's do that. All right, so let's write some code finally, now that we're 45 minutes in here. Okay, so let me share my screen, my code editor. Okay, here we are. So I think all we have to do in terms of our prompt is change it slightly. Write a short poem inspired by the artwork, described by the document. All right, well, let's pause on that because we're going to come back to that after we implement Claude 3 here. Okay, so first of all, what do we need to do? All right, so if we go to the send prompt to Bedrock bit. All right, so right now what we're doing is we are using Anthropic Claude Instant version 1, and then we created our own struct in our Lambda code here to sort of uh, format all of our details here. We're calling the invoke model method, and then we are marshaling that model onto, or unmarshaling that response onto an Anthropic response body struct that we also made. And then we are just simply returning the out.completion bit. Okay, so if we want to use Claude 3, we have to do it a little bit differently. So rather than using our own structs, what we're going to do is we are going to import here. Let's do this. We're going to do go get github.com/go-micah/go-bedrock. Okay, done. All right, so now what we've done, if we look at our go mod file, is we're requiring, where is it? Here it is. It's not used yet. Okay, fine. We're importing go-bedrock version 0.1.4. So that's a package that I built and published on GitHub that we're just going to use in this project. And all that package does is it creates a number of types specific to each large language model. So it's really just like a convenience package. And what I've done is created a um, I've created a struct for Claude 3. Okay, so let me just close that. So what does that mean? So if we go down to our send prompt to bedrock part, this stuff all stays the same, but instead of doing a struct here for our body, what we can do, we can actually just comment this out for now. What we can do is we can say, let's call it, uh, just a minute, let's call it, what am I thinking? uh, Hold on a second, let me just look at some notes here. Oh yeah, okay, got it, okay. Now I remember. Okay, so what we can do is we can say body, and we can use this thing. I'm just going to copy and paste this bit here to get us started. All right, so providers is a sort of sub package of the go-bedrock package that I wrote, and it really is just a bunch of types or structs that we can use. So I made this one called Anthropic Claude invoke model input, but we're actually going to use a slightly different one. Anthropic Claude message invoke model input. And so this is set up uh, to basically simulate all this stuff down here, but it's going to use the messages API structure, if that makes any sense. So it still has, hang on 1 second. It's not going to have a prompt actually, so Code Whisperer is a little bit off there. We are going to add in a system. Let me just, this is a lot of text here. Let me just copy and paste this a little bit here. Hold on 1 second, because there's a lot to talk about here. So let's just do it this easy way here. Okay, let me make sure I have this right. Okay, so the first message up here is called system. So one of the advantages to Claude 3 and the messages API is that you can send what are known as system prompts. And the way I understand this is that a system prompt is something you're telling Claude to do. It's sort of outside the bounds of the prompt itself. So for example, I'm saying respond with just the poem and nothing else, right? And so rather than including that in the prompt itself, we're going to tell Claude, hey, and by the way, this is how we want you to respond. So that's a pretty powerful addition to Claude 3. All right, and then the next thing here is that we have this messages structure. So rather than just passing in a regular prompt as a string, we have this whole messages structure where we can pass in a role, and that becomes really important when we start creating like a chat program, because there's basically two roles. There's the user who is, who's talking to Claude, and then there's the system itself, so Claude responding. And so you can create kind of interactive chat programs that way. In our case, we're just going to be using a single prompt, but so we're just going to put in user in here. And then we have the content itself. So one thing that is interesting about Claude 3 as well is that there's multiple kinds of content that you can send it. So rather than just text, you can also send it images. And so you can actually do like image analysis, all sorts of fun stuff with images with Claude 3, in addition to your prompt. We're not going to do that today. That's probably something to check out next time. But it's a really powerful capability of Claude 3. So pretty cool. Okay, so same thing here. So we're putting in the type of content is a text in this case, and the prompt is still the prompt. So that all stays the same. We need to change the model ID. Max tokens to receive back is going to be 500. I think this all stays the same. We no longer need stop sequences, but we can deal with that later. Okay, so I think that's all correct now. We have to change this bit. So let me grab what that should be, because the format is a little bit changed. Okay. All right, so instead of anthropic.claude-instant-v1, it's this lengthy Claude 3 sonnet, and then the date and version 1. All right, so now let's scroll down a little bit. So now we can get rid of this whole bit. Everything else should be exactly the same, except the response is going to be a bit different. All right, so instead of, hold on one second. Okay, here we go. So instead of just getting back this anthropic response body, we're going to call this provider. So we're using our imported package, Anthropic Claude messages invoke model output structure. I think that's right. That's a lot, but I think that's right. So that is going to, then we're going to unmarshal our response onto that out variable. And then instead of completion, it's a bit different now. It's going to be content 0 dot text. Okay. I have these notes here, so I know that, but ordinarily we would look at the documentation and figure all this stuff out. Okay, so what does this mean? First of all, we can go back up to our prompt because we have to change our prompt a little bit. So we no longer need this human thing, stop word. So in fact, all we need is document plus, yeah, that should be all good. Write a short poem inspired by the artwork described by the document, and we don't need this assistant bit anymore. We can remove that, I think. And then we have our system prompt telling it to only give us the poem. Okay. This also means that we no longer need these structs, or at least this one, the body struct. I'm going to leave it here for now, just as we're testing things. But eventually we should be able to delete some of this stuff here, which is nice. Okay. So let's try it out. Let's build. So we'll do a SAM build. And we can either deploy it and try it in AWS, or we can try it locally right here. Let's just try it locally to start with. So SAM, if we do that, however, we need to, what do we need to do? Oh yeah, I remember. We need to export our, hang on a second, this is silly. See if it's still in here. Yeah, export our poems table. That should do that. So now we should be able to do SAM local start API. Oops. All right. And I don't have Docker running. Okay. Oh. Yeah, we're going to need to have Docker running. So let's get Docker running. And then we'll try it again. All right, let's give Docker a second to get running. Here it comes. All right, I think it's working now. Let's see if this works. Local start API. Okay. It is now up and running. So what do I want to do? I want to create a new terminal. And we are going to do a curl localhost 3000 ID equals, let's get one we've already done, just as a test. Oh, I need to do What am I forgetting? Okay. Oh, I know. Oops. I think it needs a slash here. Ah, what is wrong? Let's see. What did I forget? Oh, hang on. No, that should work. Let me just try something else here. Hold on. Okay, that's a little better. Let's try. Oops. I know you can't see this because I am trying something in my browser and I'm not sharing my browser, so bear with me one sec. Okay, that's working now. All right, so what? Let's see if I can get it to work in the terminal here. Maybe it just needs those escape characters there. All right, now it works. Okay, cool. Okay, so that's one that's already in uh, the database. And so you can see it's got this here is a short poem inspired by the artwork, blah, blah, blah. Nonsense here. So let's grab one that I haven't done yet. Another way to do this would be to go in and delete. But I don't want to do that right now. All right, so let's try this one instead. So this is one I haven't done, so it should generate a new poem using Claude 3. See what happens. Maybe we'll get, I don't know. Let's see what happens. It's taking a little longer. Okay. All right, look at that. Very interesting. All right, so let's oh, okay. Interesting. So let's do this in the browser. Let me switch over to browser land. So you can see. All right, let's go this. Oops. I made a mistake here. Hold on. Okay. There it is again. So instead of saving the whole part where it says like, um, here's a short poem inspired by an artwork, we just have the poem. So that actually worked. Interesting. It's got all the new line characters in there as well. I think that might be a success. All right, let's try again. Let's try another artwork. Let's just scroll down here until I find another one. Here's 52278. All right, let's try this one. Okay, so ooh, we got an error that time. Wonder what that error would be. Internal server error. Um, Interesting. I think that might have to do with. I'm not sure. It might have to do with me running this locally, but it's taking a little longer this time, so maybe it's working now. Here we go. Yeah, that worked. Okay, interesting. So sometimes things are a little funny when you're running locally. All right, so now we get a new poem and it doesn't have that sort of part in the beginning that we were annoyed with. Okay, I'm going to call this a success. This is working. We're using Claude 3 now. And let me switch back over to code editor so we can see. Where is code editor? Here he is. Okay, cool. So let me stop the server and we can close this to make it a little bigger. Okay, so we converted our code to using Claude 3, right? So if we scroll down here, to do that, I imported a package I created and published on GitHub that has structs for Claude 3 and other things, which is nice. And I just had to kind of recraft what the body looks like. So we're using the system capability now, so you can tell it to respond with just a poem and nothing else. And we're sending it up just our prompt again. We no longer need to have some of the nuance of the old style of writing the prompt. So it's much more simplified now in that way too. So the prompt is super simple now. It just says, write a short poem inspired by the artwork described by the document. And that's it. Okay, and so that seems to be working. I believe this means we can get rid of these structs. We don't need this anymore. I don't think. The poem struct we do need because that's what we send to DynamoDB. This one here, we don't need that anymore. That's the response body. So we're using the package that I imported instead. So we can get rid of that. And then this bit here that's for DynamoDB as well, I believe. Yeah. Okay, so that's cool. That all works. Let's deploy it. See what we can do here. All right, so let's do a SAM deploy. Hopefully I'm logged into the correct account. All right, so let's see what happens here in a second. So it's just going to modify our function and our API. Okay, let's deploy it. Okay. And then while that's going, looks like that's done. So now I'm going to switch over to our browser. I wish there was an easy way to switch between these two things. All right, anyways, let's switch over to our browser and let's go to our actual endpoint. So this is our actual deployed endpoint. And this should still be the same. If I do that, yes, we get back the original poem with the here is a short poem part still in there. So why don't we do this? Let's go to AWS. Let's go to DynamoDB. And let's delete those old ones that have the stuff we don't want. All right, so let's go to our table. Let's explore table items. All right, we can collapse that. All right, so we can see there's a bunch of poems, and all the old ones have this here is a short poem inspired by the artwork bit in the beginning. And then the two that we just made don't have that. Here's the Miss Wilhelmina's blah, blah, blah. And then there's this other one here we just made. Okay, can we delete items right in here? Yes, we can. So we can just go through and delete the ones that are basically stale or no good. So let's just delete all these because we're going to generate them again. All right, so now we just have the two items here that are formatted the way we want them to be, basically. Okay, so that means if we go back to this one, which was the old style of doing it, and we refresh, it'll take several seconds because now it's going to be generating us a new poem. I think, hopefully. Let's see. Still going. Okay, it worked. So now we get the short poem: rising cantilevers, steel beams stretch skyward, arcing in graceful curves, industrial ballet, beauty found in purpose, Burke White captured progress, unveiling hidden charms where function met form in Cleveland's proud arms. Oh, it's lovely. Um, I wonder if I can just. Here's what the old one looked like. So the old one, which was built with Claude Instant, untitled abstraction. Well, so it's a little longer. Interesting. Just it's a totally different poem, and like a different style altogether. So that's kind of interesting. But cool. So now we can start to like really dig in with our prompt and tell it to do different things. Like maybe we want specific styles of poems, or maybe we want them to be a certain length or whatever. But this is much better because now we don't have that little annoying bit in the beginning. But that reminds me, so another thing I want to do is make this a little cleaner. So I don't want to have this error if I don't need one, and I don't want a poem if I'm getting an error. So let's jump back into code and talk through what to do about that. There's a very simple solution for this. Okay, so if I go to my code, there we are, back in our code editor. Here in our response struct, so this is the thing that we send back to API Gateway, basically, right? So when we get a poem back from the database, we just has two parameters. There's our two objects, a poem and an error. They're both strings. And the way this is designed right now is that no matter what, we send them both back. So if we have a poem, but we don't have an error, we send back the poem and we send an empty string for the error. And vice versa. If we have an error and we don't have a poem, we send the error back and then we send an empty string for the poem. That's not ideal. That doesn't look too clean. So what we can do is we can add something called omit empty. I think that's all you have to do, a comma, omit empty. We can test this in a moment. And this will modify the response. And so basically what it's saying is that if it's an empty string, just don't send it back, just omit it. So let's try that. Let's make sure that works. This should be pretty easy to test. So we'll do sam build. And then we're going to do, where is it? Sam local start API. Give it a sec. All right, it's running now. And so let's try this poem here. And this is probably one we have to recreate. Oh, no, it's not. All right, so there it is. So this came back with the poem, but no longer has that little error empty string at the end. If you notice, there's no longer that thing. Let's test it with something that doesn't exist. So number 0, let's try ID equals 0. Internal server error. Okay, maybe I. Let's try this again. Okay, so that was a little hiccup, but I tried it again, and now you can see I get back an error. Could not fetch data, 404 not found, but I don't get back a empty poem. All right, that's much better. I think in some cases, like I've seen before in some API design, you can add a stat OK or stat error kind of message here. And that way your client can create like a conditional statement around that stat, because the stat item in JSON will always be there, and it'll either be an error or OK. So you can create like a condition statement and say if it's an error, do this. If it's okay, move on. But you could also write your client around, just look for an error versus look for a poem. So I think either one is okay. And I'm just going to leave it like this for the moment. But that's something to think about. Okay, so let's stop our server. Let's deploy this guy too, because it should only take a second. Doo-doo-doo. And then I want to do a few things just to clean up a little bit. All right. Cool. So let me switch over to browser. I think I've figured out what my product feature request for StreamYard is. Ability to switch between windows. All right. So anyway, so let's try this. So I've deployed the new version. And so what you should see here is next time I run this, we should get back a poem and not the empty error string. So let's try it. Ta-da! Look at that. Worked perfectly. So now we get back our poem, and that's it. And if I put in ID equals 0, I get an error and nothing else. Very nice. I feel like we're in business. This thing works pretty well now. So let's try some other, whoops. Let's try a couple other IDs. Did we do this one yet? 137125. Okay, so it's working. There we go. Immortal Journey. Very nice. Nice little poem. Cool. Okay. I think it works. Let's see. Yeah, comes back right away. All right. How about one more? Just one more for the road, and we'll switch back to the code editor. 130707. Let's see what that one does. There we go. Severed witness. Wow, interesting. Okay. And then now if we go over to DynamoDB and I run this again, here's my collection of poems so far. And you can see none of them have the little blurb in the beginning. All right, so I think that's a success. Okay. Let's switch back to code editor. And there it is. Okay, and let's close this out for a minute. All right, so yeah, we've cleaned this up quite a bit. And we are still using our local package for grabbing art objects from Cleveland Art. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. But now you can see down at the bottom here, right here, we're importing this go-bedrock / providers package from GitHub. That's something I published on GitHub before the show today. And so that means we're still pretty much doing the same thing, except that down here, when we send stuff to Bedrock, we don't have to define the whole struct for how we want to put together the whole body with all this stuff. It's already defined for us, right? Just like that. And same thing goes for the output. So when we receive our output, we get this struct back called content and stop reason, and then there's another sort of substruct in there. And so then we can just return this guy down here. So we're able to remove a little bit of code here, make it a little bit cleaner. And now we're doing this omit empty thing as well to clean up the response to API gateway. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to do a go mod tidy. This will clean up our mod file here. And so we can see now up in the require area, we've got the go-micah / go-bedrock version 0.1.4. And so that's pinned to that version, which means that if I make a change to this package, I can either keep using this old version or I can upgrade it to the next version to take advantage of whatever changes I made. Uh, cool. So we still have about 15 minutes. So first of all, let me commit this code. So I've been just locally committing things here. I don't know, something like that. Uh, and I'm not really publishing it anywhere yet, but we can talk about that another time. So I think one thing to do would probably be, or next thing to do would probably be to eliminate the need to have this get artwork function in this package, this sort of local package here, uh, because I've already have this other package that I can import instead. Um, but I'm guessing it's probably a little bit different because I wrote it a long time ago. But that's okay. So let me see how it compares. I think let's just see. The difference here is that in this case, I'm passing in a string ID and I'm returning a byte array instead of a structured. Okay. I'm gonna have to think about this a little bit. I guess what I'm getting at is the next thing I want to do here is expand the capabilities of this service so that we can do other things besides just getting a single artwork by its ID. I want to be able to get like a random artwork, and I want to be able to search for artworks, that kind of stuff, um, before I generate any kind of poetry for it. But I'm just sort of debating right now if I want to mess around with doing that uh, right here in the function, in the package, or if I want to use the package I already published a while back. I don't think it really matters. Um, so instead, I think what would be fun to do is to take a look at what else we can do with Claude 3 because we only have a little bit of time left. All right, so let's do that. All right, let's switch over back to our browser. Okay. So before I jump into here, what I'm trying to explain in that last little bit is that I have a package that I wrote a long time ago for Cleveland Museum of Art. Oops, that's not it. That needs to be fixed. It is here, and it does a lot of the same things um, that that we're already doing in the thing we wrote earlier. But I wrote it a long time ago. I didn't know as much about Go back then that I do now. It's not documented, and it does have a test, which is interesting. I wrote a couple tests, so that's something we can dig into. Um, and it returns the responses are designed a little bit differently. So it's not returning just a byte array; it's returning this these artwork structs. So there will be a little bit of like adjusting in our project to make this work, or I can actually make this package. I can design this package a bit differently. So I don't really want to figure that out right now. Maybe that's a topic for the next week. But that's kind of where things are, and I think it's an important kind of idea because as you start to sort of build up a code base in Go, yeah, like the way to do this is to really start building out your own little kind of mini packages. That's a really nice design pattern in Go. So rather than creating like a big mono repo with everything in there, you create little mini repos. And as long as they're just Go packages, right? We're not talking about deployment tools. We're not talking about CI/CD or infrastructure as code kind of concerns. Everything's in Go. Everything's a package, and so it doesn't really matter if it's all part of one big repository. You can break them out into little pieces, and to me, that's a really nice way to operate in terms of creating like a whole bunch of functionality. And so, for example, like this Cleveland art package can be useful not just to me and my own work, but to somebody else out there in the world. And if I sort of advertise it just as being a Cleveland art or a wrapper around the Cleveland art API, uh, it might make more sense than if it's part of like a larger project. Okay, anyways, that's something I think I'd like to work out for next time. For now, what I think would be fun would be to poke around with Claude 3 because we have 10 minutes left, and we've done a lot. And there's something really cool about Claude 3, which I mentioned earlier, but I want to show just as like a little demo. So if I use in AWS in the playground, there's three different choices. You can do chat, text, or image. If we do chat and we select Anthropic, Claude 3, Sonnet, what you'll notice is it lets you upload an image. So let me see if I have an appropriate image. Let's see. All right, I've got this. No, that's not what I wanted to do. Oops. I'm just making an image right now. Okay. Here. Let me rename it. I know you can't see this, but it's okay. It's a PNG. Okay, so now I can go here and I can click Upload Image. And where did I put it? I put it in Downloads. Recents. There it is, Living Room. Okay. All right, so it's a picture of my son playing with some trains and my wife and our baby in our living room. And it's very small, so you can't really see it, but that's all right. So now I can write a prompt next to this. I can say, tell me about the dominant colors in the image. Suggest some keywords based on the image and describe what is going on in the scene. I don't know. Let's see if that works. All right, let's run it. Hang on. Let's see. Okay, let's run it. All right, and this is kind of okay. Whoa, it's working. All right, I'm gonna scroll this up and read it back to you in a second here. So, all right, the dominant colors in the image are blue, brown, and green. The image shows a cozy living room setting with framed pictures on the walls, shelves filled with books and plants, and a wooden table in the center. On the table, there are toy train cars, suggesting the scene involves playtime with children. A woman wearing a striped shirt is sitting at the table, appearing to be engaged with two young children. One child wearing a blue hoodie is leaning on the table with a slightly frustrated or pouty expression, while the other child wearing colorful striped clothing is sitting nearby. Keywords: family, home, playtime, toys, living room, children, motherhood. The scene depicts a candid moment of family life with a mother spending quality time playing or interacting with her children in their cozy home environment. Wow. That's actually better than I thought it was going to do. That's amazing. First of all, it did everything I asked it to do. It grabbed the dominant colors, which are handy. Uh, it described the scene in incredible detail and came up with not only like what's in the scene in terms of like stuff, objects, and that kind of thing, but also sort of like what's going on in the scene. Like there's a slightly frustrated or pouty expression. Uh, the mother is, appearing to be engaged with two young children, so on and so forth. So it's really interesting. It actually like interpreted what the scene looks like, and then it came up with some keywords, which I asked it to do, which are also handy. Uh, and then it kind of redid it. So it sort of summarized itself. It said, The scene depicts a candid moment of family life. Wow, that's amazing. That's like exactly what the picture is. All right, well, I should probably show you the picture, just so you can see what it looks like. Hang on, and then we're gonna call it a day. Let's just share my whole screen here. Okay, cool. So the picture, where'd it go? Oh, I closed it. Okay, oh, that's okay. Here it is. There's that pouty kid playing with his trains, wife and baby in the background, the picture frames on the walls, the whole deal. It's all right there. And brown and yeah, blue and yeah, nice, nice job. Nice job, Claude 3. That's awesome. All right. So that like brings up all kinds of ideas for me. I have all sorts of ideas of what we can build with this capability. But not only the vision capability of Claude 3, but also just it's just much smarter um, than the previous generations. So it's pretty cool. Okay, um, I think that's about it. Yeah, I think that's good for today. I think next week, I think what would be fun to do would be to start to kind of rethink this package for communicating with Cleveland Art, because what I really want to do is add a little bit more functionality to the API that we've built. So I want to add the ability to get random artworks rather than just passing in an ID. Um, and then I want to start thinking about what we actually can do with this project. Like, so now we have this service that can generate poems and spit them back to us. What can we make with that? Right? It's like, what's the final product? So, like, a few ideas are maybe we can make like an email service where people can sign up and receive like a daily email or something like that. We can make a website where you just can browse the different poems. We could do something with text messaging that might be kind of fun, or we can do all of those things. Like that's the nice thing about it being a service is that we can build all those separate applications with the same underlying service providing the data. Um, Maybe we'll just start with like a basic website and see if that's hard to do or not. Um, but yeah, that was fun. Okay, cool. Um, Thanks for hanging out. Looking forward to doing this again next week. Same time, same place, unless something comes up. Otherwise, have a great evening, have a great weekend, and thanks for joining.